Welcome to our 115th session of Aini Living Conversations. I am Julian Katari, and I get together with blue hair and women each week, and we go over one of the most amazing, or one of the many different amazing investigations that we have for the Owl Council House. For this week, we are doing the origin of life and the function of the orgasm. So settle in, um, get ready, get excited, and get and be ready to receive this information that we have prepared for you. Welcome, everyone.
Yeah.
So, is this going to be about sex? Are we supposed to? I think they don't censor they don't censor that word, do they?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, we haven't been. They haven't taken down any video so far. So not even
Yeah.
in YouTube where they're lodged to. So
Yeah,
let's get.
I think they're just getting past that. I mean, there's too much else going on to be worried about that.
Yeah.
So, well, we're going to start with the psyche again, the human nature, soul psyche. That is part of the imaginal. I mean, it is the imaginal, but there's still behind that is still the one. I'm going to just call it the one life from now on, the one life, or which is the same thing as chi, ki, prana. I'm just going to call it the one life from now on, the one source, the one life. So, which is still undifferentiated at that point. But, so I had said last week we're done. No, I'll probably keep finding bits and pieces to add to it. So, imaginal forms or bodies are not the only things that live in the psyche, human nature, soul. Thought forms become images there too, and we've talked about them. We've called them pendulums. We've called them quantum particle beings. Others call them archons. Others call them egregors or egregores, or right. So that comes from Theosophy, Helena Blavatsky, the egregores. So they're all one and the same. But one of these thought forms or pendulums is a fixation with death that has brought on a pain body for all of us. And so the social crisis we're living through is basically due to the inability of people to govern their own lives. Man is born free, and yet everywhere he is in chains. And again, I'm not making man just man. I'm making man is all of us.
Human.
Right? Yeah.
Humans.
So there's been something crucially wrong in the whole setup of our procedure of learning to know ourselves. And so wherever we turn, we find ourselves running around as if we're trapped and we're searching for the exit. It's possible for us to break out of this trap or prison, but first we have to understand that we are in a trap or a prison. This trap or prison is all of our thought forms, our concepts, these pendulums, the egregores, the archons, that have taken on a life of their own, right? Because we all feed into it. And one of the most profound is the pain body that needs misery and suffering to live. And with this is our basic problem of human evasiveness that with regard to actually living life. Think about it. How many of us actually live life?
Yeah.
The vast majority of us don't. So where is the exit into the freedom of endless open space? The exit is visible to all of us, and yet most of us don't see it. And whoever moves toward the exit or whoever points to it is called crazy or a criminal or a sinner and is condemned to burn in hell. So the trouble then is within the trapped ones, actually, not with the egregores or the archons. It's within the trapped ones. The keys to the exit are seeming in our character armoring. Right? They're within us, but they're seeming in the mechanical rigidity of our bodies. And so the sense of a full life itself has gone from the creatures in the trap or the prison. And so there's a hatred of life that has grown from the rigidity.
Okay.
And it shows up. People might say, well, I don't hate life. I quite enjoy it. But really, why do you go work in a prison then? If you love life, why would you take a job in a prison?
Mm-hmm.
If you love life, why would you work at El Salvador with CCOT?
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's
a good example.
Yeah, that's like an extreme example. But we can find this hatred of the living in the pendulum of the story of the death on the cross, but I'm going to call it the murder of Christ.
Okay.
This is the problem of our armoring, not of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And so we could say actually that Christ represents the principle of life, not the man Jesus, but the concept of Christ represents the principle of life.
Mm-hmm.
The basic characteristic of the murder of the living by the human armored animal is camouflaged in many ways. So, I mean, and there's many ways we murder people with our gossip, with our, right? It's, we think we don't, but. So the superstructure of our social existence, such as economics, warfare, irrational political movements, and social organizations that serve the suppression of life, are drowning out the basic tragedy that besets the human animal. Who's the best example of the suppression of human life? The abortion.
Okay.
Right? Because, I mean, I believe every woman has a right to choose. But what's the abortion? What are they called? Planned Parenthood.
Okay.
But when I watched a movie that showed that they offer you, they're like car salesmen. Okay, if you come in at this point, we'll reduce it to this much, the cost of it for this much. It's a woman can't walk in free and get an abortion. It's all, I mean, and it's all about suppression of life. They say it's pro-life, but it's all about suppression of life.
Yeah.
So we're drowning. Those organizations are drowning out the basic tragedy that besets the human animal in a flood of what we call rationalizations, cover-ups, and evasions of the true issue, the hatred of life. So the superstructure of our social existence relies on what seems to be a logical and coherent rationality, which is valid only in the framework of law versus crime, state versus people, morals versus sex, civilization and progress versus nature, police versus criminal, and so on, all down the long line of human misery, which is our pain body. We have lived a life of focusing on misery for so long, it's almost impossible but it's not impossible to imagine a life of pleasure. In the Christian world, another pendulum, and the cultures directly or indirectly influenced by Christianity, is the contradiction between sinful man and his God that is so sharply pronounced. We're taught that we're born in the likeness of this God and that we must become God-like, and yet we're also taught that we're sinful. The conflict between the ideal of God and the pendulum of sin has turned godly into the devilish, and the truth is that we derive from paradise or life, and yet we keep longing for that instead of actually living it. So the trap or prison of our mechano-mystical civilization, where do we get the mystical? It's, I'm not making fun of mystics, but we're also mechanical. We've been brought up to believe we're mechanical, and then there's those that, most of our spiritual gurus, that refuse to see their own armoring and claim to be mystics. So the trap or the prison of our mechano-mystical civilization has drowned out the godlike qualities in us. And within the trap, life becomes completely self-absorbed, as life in prison is supposed to be. And yet, but then we label everyone else other than us narcissistic, right? It's really stupid. So what are our godlike qualities? Well, we discussed it first in the senses of our soul, the eight forces, right? Those are just some. Some others of our godlike qualities come through the day signs of the Cholkish cycle. They everything that has to do with all of nature gives us our godlike qualities. So the characters molded by life in prison disagree and fight with one another. They proclaim themselves to have the absolute truth. And the one characteristic they share is that they want to join together and kill whoever asks the question. How in the name of a merciful God did we ever manage to get into the ugly predicament of this nightmare of a trap? Which is very true. I mean, and not necessarily kill as in taking a life, but kill in other ways, right? Like the censoring. And the reality is the functioning of living life is all around us, within our senses, before our noses, clearly visible in every single form outside of us. Outside this trap or prison is living life all around us, and life is very plastic. It adjusts to every condition of existence, and yet it's different at the bottom of the sea than on the top of a mountain ridge. It just lives a pleasure-focused paradise, innocently, gaily, not happily, right? But it doesn't matter if people are homosexual. Right? Without an inkling of any different kind of life. This is the true life, the true godly life, so to speak, is a pleasure-focused paradise of innocence, gayness, happiness, without an inkling of any other kind of life. But all we can focus on is pain and suffering. So the reshaping of the human character structure through a radical change in the total aspect and practice of raising children will deal with life itself and open us up. So we have to start raising our kids differently. So now let's move to the origin of life and the function of the orgasm. So we live in a world of change, constant change. There is no absolute stillness, only degrees of movement. Movement is nonstop without beginning or end. It is either kinetic, which means it's expressed, or it's potential in storage. In this universe of constant change, we are like seafarers navigating the ocean of life. Early mariners used the land to navigate their voyages. They didn't stray far from the land, so they could always keep that as a way of knowing where they were. But that wasn't adventuresome enough. So then they would venture out into the open sea far from land, and their gaze would have to expand to the faraway celestial bodies. The sky is always changing, and yet the changes are in a pattern that is familiar and predictable. So during the day, the path of the sun from one end of the Mediterranean to the other provided the Phoenicians with an awareness of their position. They identified then two primary poles, east, where the sun originated, and west, where it set below the horizon. They named the sunrise Asu and the sunset Ere. These words survive today in the terms Asia and Europe, or East and West. Pretty important fact right there. So then a second set of coordinates was encompassed with the Greeks in a much more vast region of space. A Greek philosopher taught the local seafarers to navigate by sighting the star Polaris, which is in the Little Dipper or the Small Bear constellation. So at present, Polaris is our North Star, the Mother Earth's North Star. And so now sailors had 4 sets of coordinates, that of the North Star and the Earth's horizon, or north to south, and that of the sun moving from east to west. Meanwhile, in China and Japan, these polarities were understood to represent a universal pattern. That pattern was the invisible order of movement or change itself, in which everything we see, imagine, or otherwise perceive is subject, to which everything is subject.
Mhm.
So that universal pattern was woven into a practical cosmology that unified both space and time. So the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. The east sun matches the early morning hours, and the west is like the afternoon or evening. High noon, when the sun is directly overhead, matches the brightness and warmth found in the south. Midnight matches the darkness and coldness of the north. So the 4 cardinal directions correspond to the 4 cardinal points in time during the daily cycle. So then these 4 stages divide and give 4 midpoints between the cardinal points in time. And these 8 stages then were understood to comprise the parameters of our earthly existence in time and space. Throughout the ancient world, the 4 cardinal directions provided the framework for the design of giant stone structures. The Great Pyramid of Egypt is perhaps the most outstanding example. The pyramid has its 4 faces aligned with north, south, east, and west in an uncanny precision. The accuracy is 0.05 degrees. That's how aligned it. They didn't have all the technology we did. In the reality, it's has 8 faces because each face is evenly split from top to bottom by a subtle indentation. These indentations are only recognized from the air and are visible from above only at dusk and dawn on the spring and autumnal equinoxes. The Great Pyramid is only one of the many pyramids around the world to have this feature. So the 8 faces mark cardinal points within 3-dimensional space, as well as cardinal moments in the flow of time. So ancient thinkers observed nature and saw that all things continually pass through alternating stages of contraction and expansion without computers and AI and all that stuff. They just knew it. They observed and saw. Well, Wilhelm Reich was the first scientist who was actually able to make this measurable and scientifically applicable. And he called the movement organ energy. Japan calls it ki, China chi, India prana, and so on. But he chose the word orgone or organ, which means the fluid that makes inanimate matter alive. That which makes a bunch of molecules exist for a certain time as a human being, an animal, or a plant. Is it energy? Well, we're going to find out. The word energy originally came from Sigmund Freud. Freud had called the love and life force libido, the drive energy. Wilhelm Reich, who was his student, understood his task then to prove that the drive energy or libido, physiologically as real physical energy. And he was able to prove it with bioelectric currents that he measured on people's skin. He was able to prove positive and negative potentials that corresponded to lust and fear. But because those potentials remained in such a small range, he didn't think they were an explanation for this biological energy. So the bottom line, however, is that concepts like organ energy, matter, time, space, chi, ki, prana, they're all theoretical concepts of the mind. They're not the truth, the absolute truth. They're just an interpretation to help us understand the one life, the one source. So we have to explain the world to ourselves in order to communicate in it and about it. And because of this, we have created an artificial world that exists only as a mental image in the form of concepts. And this is what we could call the ego. So early in his work, he discovered what he called bionts. He had dry, decaying grass that he heated to a very high temperature, and he also heated water to a very high temperature, and then he put them together in the sunlight. Very quickly, the grass cells dissolved in the water to form tiny bubbly structures that he called bions that clustered together and formed a membrane and then began autonomous movement. The origin of life, right there. He did this with sand and coal dust and other inert substances for the same result. So the energy of life is heat, water. The origin of life is heat, water, sun, and a little bit of decaying matter. Basically. The bions detach themselves then from the inanimate matter, the decaying grass or whatever, and are born as microorganisms, as single-celled organisms capable of reproducing. So from all decaying organic substances, bions are formed, and so the process of biogenesis is constantly taking place. On the bion cultures, he noticed peculiar radiation phenomena, like when they observed them under the microscope, he and his workers got conjunctivitis in the eye, which they looked through the microscope at them. And their skin would also become reddened by the bions. So they put them in the dark and they noticed a bluish radiation around them. And then their rubber gloves would become electrostatically charged by the bions. He tried to isolate the radiation by placing the bions in an externally insulated metal box called a Faraday cage. Inside, however, the phenomena became stronger. And next to the blue swaths, he also saw rapidly circling flashes of light. The phenomena seemed to be both subjective and objective. He could magnify them with a magnifying glass and also see them with his eyes closed. It was only when he saw the swaths of blue on the ground at night and the spinning waves also in the blue sky that he understood that it must be an energy that is present in both the organism and the atmosphere, and so can be perceived objectively and subjectively. And so gradually he was able to prove this energy, which he called organ, with physical measure methods like thermometers and Geiger counters. He would use binoculars to see the organ energy flowing. So what nobody else did scientifically, Wilhelm Reich did to prove that. So chi, ki, prana is no longer just an abstract concept. He proved it was there, and we can see it. He used binoculars or a telescope, and he systematically looked over the mountains toward the south with them at noon. In good weather, it flows like a stream. In the desert, the direction is undefined and flows wildly, and this is what causes desertification. According to his theory, the Earth rotates in a great organ current flowing from west to east. So the sun rises in the east, but the organ energy flows from west to east. But in the southern hemisphere, it flows from east to west. So the I Ching talks about that. They talk about how the changes go counterclockwise, and Wilhelm Reich just proved that. So, and he figures that most of the planets have this movement also. So what does this have to do with the orgasm? Well, first off, he noted that the pulsation of the bions and realized the orgasm in its 4-beat rhythm is a function of life. The 4-beat rhythm is a tension or an impulse or a desire, and then a bioelectric charge arises for the discharge and then relaxation. And this orgastic function is an elemental part of the natural order of things. This is the basic function of all living matter. Orgastic discharge produces a feeling of pleasure, and then the fusion with another object also produces pleasure, but it's blocking, on the other hand, that produces a feeling of anxiety and separation. So it's the function of the orgasm then to lustfully discharge high energy charges stored in the body. And he was the first to research the physical discharge of energy in orgasm, which all people subjectively experience as a pleasurable sensation. Ideally, what people experience during orgasm is that all the muscles of the body gently contract and relax one after another. And this discharges the energy of each muscle. This reflex runs as a soft wave over the entire musculature. And we can observe this by gently stroking a relaxed cat's back from the head down to the back. And we can then see a wave of muscle and running down from their head and possibly back up again. So the stroking transfers energy to the cat, and the cat then experiences an energy surplus, which is discharged in this muscle wave, and this is the orgasm reflex. Now, I don't see it, but I believe that my kitties run around, especially when they've been outside. They run around like crazy, and they collect all kinds of energy from Pachamama, and they come in and they get on my lap, and they want their faces rubbed, and they want to rub themselves all over my body, and then they go to sleep. That was the orgasm. They discharged all that energy. Right? Or when I pet them, and we all know that they arch their back. That's that raising. When you run your hand down their back, right? That's that. You might not see it, but you feel it. So this is very... And this is so that's the orgasm reflex, right? So it's very complicated for us humans to experience because so many of our muscles are chronically contracted. We've held our breath in fear, sucked in our stomachs, or had crying stuck in our throat. Our muscles cannot relax completely, and so they're no longer available to the orgasmic reflex. The wave of pleasure discharge then stops when it encounters contracted muscles. So while the cat sits quite cool and the waves run over its body completely relaxed, humans twitch and writhe in orgasm, and they moan and they contort their faces. We have a lot to learn from cats. We can guess that the cat perceives this wave running over its muscles as pleasurable because cats are completely uncompromising about this respect. If they're not enjoying something, they're just going to get up and leave. If they're not finding pleasure in something, they're just going to get up and leave. You already told me that. Your cat doesn't like you moving around, so I'm going to... Right? So again, we could learn a lot from cats. Humans twitch in an orgasm due to the fact that individual muscles or muscle groups contract and others do not because they're already contracted, they're already blocked. The spasmodic twitching in the human organism with orgasm is due to the fact that the reflex starts suddenly and violently. And this impedes relaxation because a muscle that contracts suddenly cannot relax as easily as a muscle that moves gently and smoothly. You can try this out by opening your hand with your finger spread wide and gently make a fist. Open your hand again and now do it violently in a sharp, jerking motion. You'll probably feel pain. So the orgasm reflex is about the involuntary musculature, which cannot be consciously controlled by us and is controlled solely by the autonomic nervous system. It is the musculature of breathing, digestion, and so on. And traumatic experiences are stored there and held there and show as cramps, muscle spasms, and so on. Many muscles remain chronically cramped and so form muscular blockages, so the wave ends here and is broken. Wilhelm Reich noted that these blockages extend in a ring from the crown of the head to the pelvis over the whole body, and they hold the unresolved traumatic experiences from childhood into adulthood, which is our pain body then. Physically, it shows physically as cramps, stiffness or limpness, emotionally as fear, listlessness, apathy, and so on, and mentally as irrational ideas as ideology, as morality, or as some mental rationalism for justifying the senseless suffering. Do we see that in the American president? So in sexuality, the orgasmic reflex is usually triggered in the pelvis by the genitals, and if unimpeded, it runs up to the crown of the head and back again. And this is supposed to happen without twitching, without wild contortions, without screaming, because it's just a gentle, relaxed, extremely pleasurable experience. However, the experience that most of us have as orgasm is something different from a gentle, pleasurable experience. And so Reich called these kind of orgasms orgasmic impotent orgasms. He believed that it is possible to restore the original living function of the complete orgasmic reflex provided by nature, and therefore also the healthy physical, emotional, and mental functioning of the whole human being, which is our orgastic potency. He said that mental health depends on orgastic potency. That is, on the extent of the capacity for surrender and the experience at the climax of sexual arousal in the natural sex act. It's the basis is the non-neurotic character attitude of the capacity for love. Mental illnesses are the consequences of the disturbance of the natural capacity for love. So the healing of mental disorders requires first and foremost the reestablishment of the natural capacity for love. But mental illnesses are the results of social sexual disorder, because for thousands of years, this disorder has had the function of psychologically subjecting people to the respective existing conditions of internalizing the external mechanization of life. This serves to anchor the mechanized and authoritarian civilization in the soul by making people unindependent. So dependent on external authority, right? He also noted what he called character armoring, which would be these muscular blockages that give people postures. That is caused by the blockage of the orgone energy or the orgasmic reflex wave. He proposed that every person experiences a formation of character or ego in the social environment into which he or she is born, and then these character structures in turn have an effect on society, depending on how much power or orgone energy, life energy flowing through each person has. And generally speaking, it's not the healthy, life-affirming, vibrant people who have the most power and influence in society. There isn't anything healthy, life-affirming, or vibrant about Mr. Trump or anyone in the government, not even Mexico president. No one.
No.
So to experience natural sexual happiness in the body, to experience the peaceful, friendly, lively, original animal and soul, which completely affirms, accepts, and loves itself, as well as its partner and everything concerning its and my sexual pleasure as it is natural. But this is the origin of the most severe sexual taboo, because it's not supposed to be that has ever existed. That's what they tell us. Yeah. No, there's no such thing as natural sexual happiness. We can just accept. Right. So Reich said that humans are the only species to not fulfill the natural law of sexuality, and is the most direct cause of all our series of epidemics. The external social negation of life results in mass deaths in the forms of wars, as well due to mental and physical disturbances of the function of life. So the sexuality process, in other words, the expansive biological pleasure process, is the productive life process par excellence. What is the quality of one's sexual experience? Does it have anything to do with different positions, changing partners, hot films, aphrodisiacs, and stylish lingerie? Well, no, of course not, because these are all externalities that can at best serve to create arousal in people who are already so jaded or character armored that they can no longer experience a high level of sexual arousal from within themselves. So the quality of sexual experience is measured only by the degree of sexual fulfillment, devotion, and satisfaction that people experience in sexual union. Fulfilling sexual love takes place in the bioenergetic core of the human being, where every human feels good and is peaceful, sexual, and communicative and alive at their core, which is what our natural God nature is, our original divinity. So neuroses develop in earliest childhood by forcibly stopping natural emotional impulses, or I should say pleasure, sensational impulses. So the libido or the life energy or organ is directed then against the individual himself or herself. So the sum of all libido deflections is the structured character. The structure of character armor is based on the denial of libido, the life force in childhood, depending on the developmental stage at which drive satisfaction is blocked. For example, a baby is hindered in the satisfaction of oral pleasure needs, contact with the mother's breast, and so might go on to be the thumbsucker then, or a person who needs to vape all the time. Or if a 3-year-old child, instead of being allowed to feel pleasure in excretion, is forced to develop disgust and revulsion, how much of the world was forced then during potty training to believe that it's awful? We saw that in 2020, right? With the purchase of toilet paper.
Okay.
Right? So if they are forced to believe that's disgusting and awful instead of pleasurable, then certain character trajectories are set.
That's something I always intuited from raising kids. Like everybody taught, I would see everybody teach them how to be, like everything needs to be learned by force, and everything is, they make learning unpleasurable.
Yeah.
And still, school, there's nothing. Schools look like jails.
And yeah, they do.
Worse, like Mexican schools, they look like jails.
Yeah, but I mean, so right, there's nothing pleasurable, but it starts with, oh, that's disgusting, instead of, oh, that feels good to take a shit.
Yeah.
That needed to happen. It feels good.
Yeah.
Right. So how did we see this? How do we see this character armoring play out in 2020 with all the people that hoarded toilet paper?
I don't know exactly what you're referring to. I mean, I knew they hoarded paper. I never saw it.
Taking a shit is disgusting, right? We can't deal with our own shit. It's not pleasure. It's having a moment of excretion is not pleasurable. So therefore, we have to have lots of toilet paper to deal with it. I might be reaching there, but
yeah, I don't quite find the connection, but we get the point.
Yeah. So the vital energy or organ energy regulates itself naturally without compulsive duty or compulsive morality. And people who are brought up with a negative attitude toward life and sex acquire a pleasure anxiety, which is physiologically anchored in chronic muscular spasms. This neurotic pleasure anxiety is the basis on which life-negating, dictator-producing views of life are reproduced by the people themselves.
Mm-hmm.
It is the core of the fear of an interdependent, freedom-oriented way of life. So the bottom line is we just don't want freedom.
Yeah.
Right? The character structure of modern man who continually reproduces a 6,000-year-old mechanistic authoritarian culture is typified by armoring against his inner nature, his divinity, and against the social misery which surrounds him and which he helps to perpetrate. This armoring is the basis of isolation, indigence, craving for external authority, fear of responsibility, mystic longing, sexual misery, and neurotically impotent rebelliousness, as well as pathological tolerance of what we're seeing in the world today. We humans have alienated ourselves from and grown hostile to life. And this alienation is not born of biology, it's born of socioeconomic origin. Since the emergence of the mechanized patriarchy, the natural pleasure of work and activity has been replaced by compulsive duty. Sexual energy or organ energy is the biological energy which in the psyche, soul, imaginal gives us our true nature character of thinking and sensing. And when we aren't aware of the archetypes of the natural world that channel, and that's what archetype means. It's a cookie cutter, basically, right? That channel this organ energy, this one life. That's what it is. That's God, is organ energy. It's that simple. We humans then have created our own archetypes, which Carolyn Meese talks about, a spiritual teacher. She has this whole thing of archetypes. And I believe that that those are the armoring that don't actually allow the organ sexual energy, libido, which is absolutely natural. It's a function of life to flow. We want to be free, so therefore we must know how free peoples are structured. And this we find out from the various forces that through the I got this sentence all. We find this out by tapping into those 8 archetypes for our soul senses, the archetypes of the Mayan calendar, that right, the archetypes we see, because and all the animals and trees and objects around us, we can find out what our true divine nature is by communicating and listening and learning from them, because none of them are armored. Well, you know, male pigs get armored because they fight all the time, but not they're fighting over who gets to screw which woman. So, but that's a different armoring. That doesn't stop the flow of it. Just gets really tough skin, so they don't feel the pain. But that doesn't stop the flow of vital life force energy through them, or the organ energy. So if we want to be free, we need to know how free peoples are structured through the various archetypes that help form us, as opposed to modern man who thinks he's a machine.
Yeah.
And it's not various forces, it's one force that flows through different archetypes that has a different feel. There's even and that's the science of morphology coming from Rupert Sheldrake. And as we talked before about in embryology, about the 8 metabolic fields that form the baby from the outside in, that's not different. It's different forms of energy, but it's still the same underlying one source, one life that differentiates itself through different. But it's also always at the bottom of that is the yin and yang. So first we have the polarity of sun rising from east to west, or the organ, the life energy flowing in the opposite direction, counterclockwise. That then differentiates into the yin and yang, and we'll get into that more, which then I need to figure these poles out better, because there's 8.
Yeah, it's a whole
8 polarities. But yeah, so what's the function of the orgasm life?
to create life.
Well, a pleasurable life, just to live a pleasurable life,
Hmm.
pleasurable, happy life.
Yeah.
Because it's
Wow.
not for procreation only. It's not for making babies only, without a doubt.
Yes, and that so it reminds us of, well, it uncovers a whole lot of things that we get, that we are taught in a twisted way, and that we aren't even, we continue to practice and approach in that twisted way. I get so much. I mean, for example, I'll get together with a girl, and even though she might be like open for your pleasure, there's always, in the romantic part of the relationship, there's always some type of like pleasure is has to be limited, because otherwise it becomes unholy
Yeah.
or unsacred. It's a very
Well,
denaturalized like way of thinking that we have been given.
it is,
Very.
and Wilhelm Reich really got interested in this from the anthropologists that studied the people of the Trobriand island, that Papua New Guinea, I guess, is
Mhm.
Trobriand,
Okay.
where they had uh, their kids start having sex at 3 years old or however old they are. It's natural, because first
Hmm.
of all, they live in one room hutch, so the kids see mom and dad engaged in sex all the time.
Hmm.
It's not taboo, it's not hidden, and it's just an open way of life. And the islanders talk about their kids being sexually involved with other kids.
Hmm.
The only thing they know is that the brother's not supposed to have sex with the sister, right? Or the same. That's. But other than that, sex is free. It's a freely occurring happening.
Yeah.
At least at that point, that was in the early 1900s when the anthropologist was studying. Who knows if we've missionarized Papua New Guinea so much that they no longer do that? But that to me is, yeah, that's natural.
Mhm. And you've tied that to some hard science, to some very unknown research of how that works, of how our wiring is connected to this, how important this is for our well-being. And so we must say that this is what we're sharing this, and we're studying this because it is a crucial thing to have into consideration if you are going to have a sovereign community, if we are to progress as a humanity, if we are to become the next stage of humanity, a more free, a more connected humanity, then we have to take this into consideration, and we cannot copy the past paradigms.
Yeah.
And this is kind of hard to say, but we get a lot of this denaturalization from the practice of religion, from
Oh,
different religious practice. So we
absolutely.
really have to open ourselves up to being able to go beyond that. And doesn't mean you
Well,
stop knowing the sacred. In fact, it becomes a better way to know the sacred.
absolutely, absolutely. To know that the bottom line is Jesus was the first human to be fully content with himself as a sexual person. He had 3 wives. He loved making love, having sex, and was fully divine. He
Mhm.
was one of the first to integrate that, but yet we have denied that. We have made him celibate. We made his wife a whore. We've and his mother a virgin.
Yeah, and that we need to really, really take a good look into,
And
and use
then,
this kind of research
uh,
to broaden our scope about our relationships.
yeah, So first of all is accepting ourselves as sexual beings,
Hmm.
right? That enjoy sex. That's the biggest. And here's the other thing. This is why I put this at the beginning, talking about this as we tune into to find out how free peoples are structured, is to tune into how our world, our earth, our mother earth works. So if we stop keeping sex for the evening, when we're all tired, when the energy of the day has drained, maybe we ought to
Hmm.
be thinking about our sexual time as high noon, when we're at our most
Oh
potent.
yeah, that's a common thing that you learn, and if you start learning tantra, it tells you some tricks
Yeah.
like that. Try having it at a time where there's a peak of in energy. Yeah.
Well, so that then behooves us to really pay attention to the natural rhythm of the world, and that's where the hunter gatherers, maybe they went out. We don't know what their schedules were. Nobody's
Hmm.
talked about that. Maybe they went out hunter gathering in the morning, came back and made love, and spent the rest of the day lounging in pure relaxation
Hmm. Yeah.
with the waning energies of the day, and things like that. So it really. So this is why next week, before we go on to talk about how free peoples are structured, that will be our basis of the I Ching and DNA, um,
Hmm.
and the Cholkish cycles and all that. This is how we're going to find out how truly free people are structured, is through all these archetypal patterns.
Hmm.
But before we go into that, next week I want to talk about the lie of marriage.
Oh, okay, that's great.
That's one of the most important ones.
So I like how this is all connected and coming together and weaving itself, and kind of even having a type of a sequence, and it almost feels like it's leading us somewhere.
Yeah,
And as soon as we, was not as soon as we're done, while we are weaving this, I hope that anybody watching this, and even those not watching this, they also get summoned into coming into living in Aini, living in Aloha with us in this project, to bring back, to rescue humanity from the dehumanized state that they have brought us to this
yeah,
uncivilized civilization.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so can I imagine a society where can I imagine having sex with my lover in the same room with another couple? No, I can't. That's it. That feels really uncomfortable to me. Uh,
Hmm.
or even having it in front of my kids. Oh yeah, no, that feels
Yeah, we're not
uncomfortable.
used to that,
That's
and
just programming.
yeah, and we gotta point out. I mean, everything that, I mean, we can grab a lot from different cultures and things, but we find our own way, and we always will find, and what is best, what works best for who we are, where we are, and what we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, and that's probably another reason why the colonizers were so anti all the Native Americans, whether they're we. There's nothing written about the Incans and the Mayans' sex lives that I know of, anyway. But they were probably all the same as the Trobriand Islanders. I mean, no one had a house with 10 bedrooms in it.
Hmm.
Back then, everyone shared quarters, and I mean, think about the American Indians that lived in teepees or the longhouses.
Hmm.
They were all having sex in front of each other. Their kids all grew up like that. That's probably another thing that really ter- terrorized the white conquistadors was, oh my God, having sex all the time.
Yeah.
But none of them, that subject doesn't ever come up. That's not, it's very interesting to me that sex doesn't ever come up with the Native Americans, nor with the Incans, nor with the Mayans, nor with the Toltecs. That's just not there that I've seen.
You gotta go looking for it. Yes, it can come up from here and there, or it can, well, come up means the algorithm pushes it to you, and the algorithm only pushes very superficial stuff. So you gotta go looking for it.
Yeah. What how their sexual lives worked,
Mm-hmm. Alrighty,
So
so this was very, very profound and very enriching for everyone. And we're gonna come back next week with the lie of marriage,
yeah.
the lie of marriage. So we invite you next week at the same time, Wednesdays at 7 o'clock Central Standard Time. Please visit alohaini.living.com and please support this effort to become the new humanity, to take the next step and get unstuck from this rotting, decaying, crumbling civilization.
Yeah.
Lots of love for everyone, and we'll see you next week. Dun, dun.